Troubleshooting in Linux. This is our third and final video covering troubleshooting, and what we're going to do in this one is talk about backup problems, application failures, and how to diagnose networking problems. And finally, what I'm going to do is just point you to some resources and show you where you can get more information about problems in Linux and also how you can get help from the Linux community. Let's get started. Let's start by talking about backup and restore errors. There's basically two kinds of problems you can run into: problems on the computer side of things and problems on the backup device side of things. On the computer side of things, you can run into problems with drivers and permissions on devices and files. And on the backup device side of things, you'll run into problems like media errors. Now, the kinds of problems you run into with drivers on the computer side of things is just things like the driver's not there, you've got the wrong driver. So this is really like an installation or setup issue. Once you get some new backup device, you've got to get the right drivers for it and get it all working, and then you'll be fine from there on out. But if you try to back up something to a device and it's there and it's plugged in, but you've got the wrong driver, the computer's going to say something like no such device. Okay? So that's the kind of errors you'll see if you have the wrong driver or a bad driver. And then you have the problems with device permissions. So even if somebody can read the files that they're looking at and the right drivers are in place, but they don't have permissions to write to the device, there's going to be errors involved with that. And then there's file permissions. Okay, so again, if you're going to back up all these files, you've got to be able to read all the files and directories that you're trying to back up. And so typically the root user does the backups because the root user is going to have the device permissions and the permissions to read all the different files and directories in the system. All right, and then on the backup device side of things, the most common error is media errors. And these can be the worst kind of errors. And the reason is just because, the time you discover these is typically when you're trying to do a restore. You've got your tape, somebody's lost some files or something's happened to the disk, and now you want to restore some files, and you go to do it from the media and it says, sorry, it's corrupted. Well, okay, so this is the worst kind of problems. It's like Murphy's Law in action, right? Right when you need the stuff, that's when you discover that it's bad. So the one thing here is do not gzip your files, okay? Gzip is just a way to compress it on top of tar. So if you're using tar to back up your system, don't gzip on top of that, because then, there's this big long tape here and it's going through the tape, and if this part right here is corrupted, well then the way that gzip works is that we can't recover any more data on the whole rest of the tape because it's all sort of like this sequential coding to compress it. All right? And so if you're going to use tar by itself and you go through and this part of the tape's corrupted, well, if your file's down here, that's perfectly fine if you've just used tar. But if you use gzip, we're not going to be able to read that because this is messing it up. Okay? So don't use gzip with tar. Okay, that's one lesson. Another thing here is just, take care of your backup media. Don't abuse it. Don't stick it in your trunk on some 100-degree summer day because the tape's going to suffer from that. At this place I used to work, we had these, old school, like, big tape drives like this, and for some reason we always got this mail with these little stickers on it. I don't even remember what the mail was anymore, but we always had these stickers laying around in the office, and so we would put the stickers on the tape like this every time we used the tape. And we didn't have that many tapes. It was this university, and we were just sort of like students running the lab and stuff. And we didn't have very many tapes, and we would put these stickers on the tape every time we used the tape. And then when the tape got all filled up with stickers, when we covered the whole surface, then we just threw the tape away. We knew that was like a sign that we had used the tape too many times and we weren't going to risk it anymore. And this is a good policy to have something to say, okay, definitely don't abuse this. And when we've used it so many times, it costs $5 or $10 or $20 or whatever, we got our use out of it, and let's throw it away and buy a new one. Okay, and at really sensitive installations, you're going to have backups of backups. At this bank I used to work at, we did backups every night, and we actually copied the backup tapes and took one of those backup tapes off-site to another branch of the same bank and just kept them there. Okay, even though the computer was at the branch that I worked at, for all the branches, and I did these central backups, we would take the tapes and put them somewhere else, because when we needed a restore for the bank, there was no like, oh, sorry, the tape's corrupted. I had to provide that restore, and it didn't matter whether, if my tape was corrupted, nobody wanted to hear that. They just wanted me to get the backup, so that off-site location was a great spot, great security policy. So in some sense, we had backups of our backups. Now let's move on and talk about how to identify application failures on servers. And these could be web servers or FTP servers or telnet servers or email servers or whatever. Okay, and I want to talk about this from two perspectives. First, from the user's perspective, like you're trying to use some server and it's not working. How do you conclude what's broken along the way? Is it you, is it them, and so on? And the other perspective is from the system administrator's perspective. So if you're the system administrator of some server and you have to keep that server up and running, how can you do that? What tools can you use to aid you in keeping that server up and running? Okay, so let's talk about it from the user's perspective first. And let's use Telnet as the example. So I'm going to telnet to sdf.lonestar.org. So I telnet there and I get this login prompt. What does that tell me? Well, it tells me that Telnet's working, it tells me their internet connection's working, and it tells me that my internet connection's working. So everything's coming up roses here, right? Everything's good. But if I try to telnet to some site and it doesn't come up, well, then what's broken? Is it Telnet? Is it their internet connection? Is it my internet connection? And so on. So typically what I do is I keep this list in my head of sites that are, the good sites, okay, that are always up. And every time I've tried to telnet to lonestar.org, it's always working. So this is my telnet barometer site. If I try to telnet to some site and it doesn't work, I immediately turn around and try to telnet to this site. And if this doesn't work either, then I just conclude that it's me. And we'll talk later in the video about how to get your own network connection up and running again. If this does work, then I can conclude that it's the other server that I was trying to telnet to that's broken, and I'll wait and try again later. Okay, so this is, that's the way I diagnose, telnet problems. For the internet, if I'm trying to bring up some web page and it doesn't work, well, the site that I always go to that's on my good list is google.com. Okay, that site's always up and running. They've got 5 million Linux servers running that site. It's not going down anytime soon. Okay, so that's my barometer site for the web. And that's the way you do things. Like if you're trying to diagnose these problems, just diagnose whether it's them or whether it's you. And if you can diagnose that it's you, like I said, later in the video, we'll talk about how to get your own internet connection back up and running. Okay, so let me break out of here. Okay, and now what we're going to do is just talk about this from the servers or from the system administrator's perspective. So you're the system administrator of some server, and now what can you do to keep that running? If you look out on the web, there's always these statistics out that say things like, last year there was $25 billion in lost sales because internet connections were slow or sites were down and stuff like that. So if you're the system administrator of some site, and the revenue of the company depends on you keeping that site up and running, what can you do to do that? Well, I've bookmarked some web pages here. One of them is at the site called hotscripts.com. And in that site, they've got this PHP server monitoring script that you can grab, for the good price of free. And basically what it does is it just probes your FTP servers, your POP servers, your Telnet servers, your web servers, and it probes them every 5 or 10 minutes, whatever you set up, and it says things like, okay, yeah, this site's down, and then it'll send you some email when that site's not working, and then you can immediately get on it. So if the site's working for not working for a few minutes, you're going to get a notification and you can get right on that. So if this is a revenue critical site that's running, you're going to be right on it and it's not going to be down for very long. Okay, there's other things out there too. Perlcoders.com. Perl's just another language like PHP. It's a good web-based language for this kind of stuff. And this script here is a system monitoring script. Again, it monitors all sorts of stuff. It monitors, all the different services that you can have. It monitors memory usages and so on. Okay, so again, both of these scripts are good tools to help you as a system administrator keep your sites up. You can't be bothered, every 5 minutes all day long checking to make sure the sites are up. And maybe somebody else in your company is going to notice it and tell you about it, but you don't want to rely on that. If you've got some monitor script in place that can probe your servers every few minutes and tell you as soon as it discovers something's wrong, you can get right on it. And this is this thing's working 24 hours a day and it doesn't get paid, right? So it's your best employee there. And that's the side of it from the system administrator side. That's the perspective from the system administrator side, is you just want to keep track of all the servers that you're responsible for and keep them running. So to troubleshoot networking problems, you're going to use some of the tools we talked about back when we set up networking, like ping and ifconfig and route and those sort of things. And I'll review those and just talk about them more in the context of troubleshooting. Okay, so let's move over to the whiteboard, and I'm going to draw out a diagram here of just the structure of the network and then how we can test each aspect of the network. Then we'll come back to the Linux screen and actually do those tests. Now let's talk about the structure of the network that you're connected to. And some of this is going to be a review from when we set up networking, but I just want to make sure all the concepts and the terms are fresh in your memory so that when we do the troubleshooting part, all that stuff will make sense and sink in. Okay, so here you are sitting at your computer, and your computer's got this IP address. Okay, and remember, it's 4 numbers, and each number is between 0 and 255. Okay, so there's my IP address. Okay, and remember, your IP address can either be static, meaning you have the same IP address every time you use the internet, or it could be dynamic, which means when you log onto your computer and you want to access the internet, your computer goes over and asks your ISP over here and says, hey, give me an IP address because I want to use the internet. Your ISP gives your computer one back, and now you've got an IP address for this session. All right, but that IP address, even if it's static or dynamic or whatever, it's unique. Nobody else on the internet has that IP address right now. All right, so there's your IP address. That distinguishes you on the whole internet. And then we've got our network here, and basically the first thing in line on our network is the gateway computer. Okay, the gateway, again, your ISP gave you an IP address for your gateway computer, and that is your door to the internet. Okay, so here's the whole world of the internet out here, and every transaction you do, every web page you look at goes through your gateway. Now, other people are using this gateway. It's not just yours, you know. Other people on your ISP are out here, and they've been assigned the same gateway as you. And they're all, they're all using that gateway. All the traffic for all you guys is going through the gateway. Now what's out here on the internet? Well, stuff that we know about, right? Like stuff like Linux.org is out here, stuff like Google.com is out here, and there's other stuff out here too that's central to us using the internet. Things like name servers. Remember, like Linux.org has an IP address, right? But what we refer to it as Linux.org. Well, that name server is the thing that translates between Linux.org and the numbers, because all the routers and all this stuff in the network out here wants numbers. So when I say, okay, give me Linux.org on my browser, it goes out to the gateway, it goes out to the name server, and then it says, hey, I'll translate that, give you that number, and then I'm directed over to this machine. All right, so that's how the whole network is working, where everybody's going through the gateway here. Everybody on this ISP is going through the gateway, using name servers to translate numbers or names into numbers, and then the traffic's routed out here. All right. One last thing I'm going to talk about before we go out to the Linux screen is the special IP address 127.0.0.1. This is a reserved IP address that works on every machine, and it refers to the local machine. So when I'm sitting on this computer and I refer to 127.0.0.1, that refers to my machine. When this guy's sitting at his computer and he refers to 127.0.0.1, that refers to his machine. Same for this guy. That refers 127.0.0.1 refers to his machine. All right, so this is going to be a useful diagnostic tool for us when we're trying to determine when the network when something's not working. Is it a problem on our computer? Is it a problem in the gateway? Is it a problem in the name server? Is it a problem on their web server out here? And having that little piece of information is going to help us determine where the problem is in this whole picture. All right, so let's go back out to the Linux screen and do some troubleshooting. Let's start by looking at the symptoms and the cures for your local network interface being down. Okay, so what are the symptoms of your local network interface being down? Let me open up a Mozilla window. You'll see the window open, but immediately it comes up and says www.cbtnuggets.com could not be found. That's set to my home page, so that's where it tried to go. But immediately that came up. It didn't even spin for a while. Down here in Mozilla, you'll see like a barbershop little white and blue spinny thing going, and that thing will be spinning if it's trying to get there. But it didn't even get that far. It just said no, it couldn't be found. Check the name and try again. Okay, another sign that your local network interface is down is if you ping that 127.0.0.1 business. Okay, remember that's your local. That's just a reserved IP address referring to your local machine. If you do that, it says network unreachable. That's another sure sign that your local network interface is down. Now, if like a wire is unplugged from the wall, this would still work. Okay, this is referring just to your local machine. It doesn't even have to go over that wire that's plugged into the wall. This is all working internally. So if this is not working, that means your interface is down, and the way that you can remedy that is with a restart. Okay, so you go over to network and you do a restart there, and you say, okay, setting network parameters, bringing up this stuff, and hopefully everything will come up okay, and it says okay, everything's brought up. And now if I go back and ping 127.0.0.1, you're going to see some responses here. So now that's working. Let me Control C here. Again, if I bring up a Mozilla window, we can see that that's also fixed. It's going to come up, and there, now we have the cbtnuggets.com homepage. All right, so that's the sure sign and the cure for the local interface being down. Now, just because I was able to ping 127.0.0.1 doesn't mean that I'll actually be able to ping my IP or ping my computer by its actual IP address. Okay, so here in this case, I'm going to ping this. I'm just going to hit Control C here. And you can see 4 were transmitted, 0 received, 100% packet loss. I was getting these errors, destination host unreachable. Okay, so this is a problem. What this is saying is that something's wrong here, but it's not the local problem, right? Because I was able to ping 127.0.0.1, right? And there I was getting answers back from ping, and you know, I was 3 transmitted, 3 received, perfect. Okay, but I couldn't do this. Well, the reason why lies in the output to the route command. If we look at the output to the route command, you'll see over here the first column here is destination. And if the address that it's trying to get to, like 127.0.0.1, if it looks like the address and destination, it's a simplistic explanation, but this will get the point across. If this address looks like the one you're trying to ping, then this is the interface that it will use, LO, for local loopback interface. Okay, and so that interface is the one that it uses when I ping 127.0.0.1, and that was working just fine. All right, we saw that. But when I try and ping, you know, my actual IP address, 209.11.135.226, that kind of looks like this address. So this is the row that it uses to determine, and this is the interface that it uses to do that. So when you see this, you can see this is using the Ethernet 0 interface, and 127.0.0.1 would be using the local loopback interface. And then you can see why one would work and one wouldn't work, because they're using different interfaces. So if you can narrow down that this is the problem, what that means is that's some sort of hardware problem. Your Ethernet card's, you know, dislodged, or it's broken, or the wire is unplugged from the back of your computer, or something like that. Okay, so that's the problem there. And if you go around and snug up all your wires and your card and stuff, and that's still an issue, then there's something wrong that you're not going to be able to fix probably. It's just something messed up on your Ethernet card. All I did to get this to happen was I just unplugged the wire from the back of my computer. But it's definitely some sort of hardware problem. So if I plug that back in, and then redo this again, okay, if I go back and ping 209.11.135.226 again, now you'll see that it's coming back, and that's because I plugged that wire back in the back of my computer. Okay, so that's the signs or the symptoms and the cures for Ethernet 0, that interface being down when you can't ping your own machine by its actual IP address. Once you've determined that all the local stuff is working, you can ping your local machine by 127.0.0.1, and you can ping it by its actual IP address. Then your next step would be to test out the gateway. If you forget the actual number of the gateway, again, use the route command, and the gateway address is this one down here. Okay, it's the one for the default destination. All the things that aren't to the local machine use this gateway. And again, you can see it's using the ETH0 interface, which you know is working now because you tested out pinging your local machine by its actual IP address. So now you want to actually ping this number. Okay, so you just say ping, and let me show you another Linux trick here. If you highlight this and then a middle mouse button click, that'll paste it down in the command line, and that'll just save you some typing, and I'm all over saving myself some typing. So I'll hit enter here, and now you can see that I'm getting responses back, so that means the gateway is working. Okay, if the gateway wasn't working, this would hang, and you would get those error messages like destination host unreachable. All right, so this shows that the gateway is working, and the next step would be to test if the name server is working. To determine if it's the name server that's the problem, we can use the Linux dig command. And what dig will do is it will just isolate out that part that translates names into numbers and tell you if that step is working. All right, so here's how we can use it in its like most basic form. So we say dig www.linux.org. Okay, and I hit enter here, and like a couple lines scrolled off the screen saying what version of dig it was and stuff, but most of the important stuff's here. Okay, so here's the question section. It's showing you what you asked about. And then here's the answer section. So it says, okay, you want the address for this website, and there's the IP address for that website. So dig was able to translate the name into the number. All right, and it used one of my name servers to do that. And down here, it'll tell you exactly which name server it used, 209.10.34.23. And if we print out etcresolve.conf, that's the first IP address in my list. That's the first name server in my list in resolve.conf, and that's the one it used to determine or to do the translation from linux.org to the number. All right, so that's what dig does, and if this was all, we went through, we tested our local network interface, we tested our gateway, we tested our name server, and they're all working, but we still can't, load some web page off a server. Well, then the problem must be that server's down, and this is now we can definitively say that if we've tested those other three things first. All right, so this is how networking troubleshooting goes. You test your local stuff, you work your way out, and then you can finally deduce if it's that thing over there, that server over there that's not working, or if it's something along the way like your name server, your gateway, or your local interface. The last thing I want to cover in this video and the troubleshooting section overall is just, where can you go to get more help? Obviously, I can't cover everything in a few videos that could possibly go wrong on your system. You could own like 10 Linux books. They're not going to cover everything that can go wrong on your Linux system, and you're going to have to eventually seek out some help from some outside source. Definitely ask your friends. If you have friends that do Linux, ask them, and that's part of the community. People are willing to help, and one day you'll know something that they'll need help on, and it'll all come back. Okay, I bookmarked a web page here that's pretty helpful too, linuxquestions.org. Okay, where newbies come for help, it says up top there. All right, and there's the Linux Penguin. That'll make you feel at home. And it's just got all sorts of stuff in here. They've got forums so you can ask questions. But what's nice here too is you can just browse the board and you can perform a search and view the index. Okay, so they've cataloged everything, all the questions that are going on, so you can look back, and you might not even have to ask the question. You just look back through what other people have asked, and maybe you're going to find the answer to your question. Let me give you a couple tips here to get the most out of these sort of forums. First, nobody's getting paid here, right? It's a community. And in this community sort of environment, you're going to have to show that you've put some work in before people are going to really feel like they owe you something, like that they'll actually help you out. Okay, so definitely put some work in. Try it, don't write in and say, I've got a networking problem, help me. Write in and say, okay, I've pinged this, I've pinged that, and here's the output to the route command. I don't understand this, and ask something specific, and somebody, will write back and tell you what's going on. All right, and the other thing is, definitely do some work like perform a search. Go back through the index. See if your question gets asked like every other week, and people get tired of answering that kind of stuff. So just go back and see if it's a common problem that other people have had, and you can just use the index and the search mechanism to find out about that problem, look at the answers, and maybe you don't even ever have to really post something on there. Okay, and there's lots of forums out here besides linuxquestions.org. Do a search in Google for Linux forums or something, and you'll find all sorts of stuff out there. Okay, so that's the main thing I'm trying to get across. You put in some effort. It's a community thing. You put in some effort. Somebody's going to be there to help you out, and vice versa. You should stick around on these question boards too. When somebody new asks a question and you know the answer, go ahead and chime in and tell them, and feel good about it because you're contributing back to the community then. Well, it's time to wrap up our last troubleshooting video. First topic in this one was backup and restore problems. We talked about the different types of problems you could encounter, why they would happen. And the moral of the story with backup media was, be kind to your backup tapes and they'll be kind to you, something like that. Don't stick them on your dashboard on some hot summer day. Application failures on servers we talked about next, like from the user standpoint and also from the system administrator standpoint. Then we talked quite a bit about diagnosing networking problems. The network's such a central part of the computer these days. If networking's not working, we feel like our computer's not working. So I wanted to go through that in quite a bit of detail to show you what happens at every step of the way. What if something's broken? What does it look like? That kind of stuff. And finally, I just tried to point you to some outside help. There's tons of resources out there, and really I'm trying to encourage you to use the outside help. Don't be shy. Ask intelligent questions. Give people information about your system if something's broken, and people will be there to help out. And in turn, once you start to know more stuff, stick around on those forums and help other people out, and that's part of the Linux community. Well, I hope you found this nugget informative, and thanks again for viewing.